Hello everybody, my name is Nahlah. I'm a foreign correspondent with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and we're here in London on the day 1 year before this country separates officially from the European Union. March 29th, 2019 is actually the deadline. It is the day of the divorce. It doesn't actually lead to the instant separation of the UK from the EU, but it starts a transition process after which those two entities will become separate. Now, it is a big day here, lots of coverage of this issue. We've been on World Report all morning talking about some of the key issues at stake here, what it means for ordinary people, what it means for some young people here, and what it means for Northern Ireland. We were just there a few days ago trying to determine just what it means for a place that actually thrives on the idea that there is no border between the European Union and the United Kingdom. So we know a little bit about this. We've been living the results of that vote, the Brexit vote. If you have some questions, please send them our way on Facebook, and I'll try my best to answer them. So I'll wait for your questions. In the meantime, I'll tell you a little bit about our trip to Northern Ireland. We decided to go there because it has emerged over the last few months that actually, of all the issues, and there are many, that are standing between the United Kingdom and the EU in terms of working out a deal for separation, Northern Ireland and what happens with the border there is one of the biggest issues. And so we had a chance to actually talk to people on both sides of what is now an invisible border. About 20 years, exactly 20 years ago actually, 20 Good Fridays ago, a deal was signed between the warring factions in Northern Ireland that allowed them a number of measures to end the so-called troubles there, but one of which also guaranteed free movement between the Republic of Ireland, which is in the EU of course, and the United Kingdom. And the question now is what happens to that border, whether there needs to be something more than just an invisible border to delineate the difference between the United Kingdom, which is leaving, and the Republic of Ireland, which is staying in the EU. So people there inevitably, no matter which side they were on, no matter how they voted in the Brexit vote, had one concern in mind and one red line, and that is they did not want to see a hard border. And that they mean by that a physical infrastructure at the border where there's a customs office and there's a checkpoint, that would be counterproductive, not just because of the peace agreement that was signed there, but also because of the economic consequences. Essentially, it is a one island economy. People go back and forth for all kinds of reasons, for jobs on one side or the other, for shopping, and for love. We met a couple actually who straddled that border. So there are a number of reasons that keep those places together. Everybody there said that they're not interested in seeing a hard border, and the government here and Brussels have committed to no hard border, but they have not been able to figure out how precisely to do that. So that's what we've been up to, and I'll just take a look to see what questions you're asking. Let's see. Are they going to revote Brexit after realizing the implications? It's a very, this is a question from Elke Porter. I hope I'm not saying that correctly. It's a question that's come up quite a bit, Elke, as you say, and it has been talked about increasingly in this country in the past few months. And it is, as you say, because people are learning more, not still everything, but more about the mechanics of and the consequences of what it will take for this country to separate from the EU. Now, I didn't realize this myself actually until we spoke to an expert yesterday who knows, an analyst who knows about all of this. And he said in his estimate, he felt that it would actually take a pretty major event, a change in the calculus for this country to consider going to a second vote, even though there are people calling for it. And the reason is that actually it will require 326 people, MPs in Parliament, to vote in favor of a second referendum, and that would require the changing of the thinking of a large number of Conservative MPs. And as far as this analyst was concerned, that this was a pretty big job and it's not likely to actually happen. So for the moment, there is talk, there's more talk about a second referendum, but technically speaking, it's not an easy thing to accomplish. Having said that, There are many people who are talking about it. We interviewed a young man who is actually the designer of an ad campaign called Swindled. That's what he called it. It's a big yellow poster, and he used burgers to depict what was sold to the British people and what they're actually getting. And so what they were sold was a big, nice looking burger, and on the other end was a squashed flat burger. And the idea being that he felt that the British people had been swindled, they were given wrong information. He felt that as a young person, and he says a lot of people around him, that there is a growing interest in looking again at the vote that happened on Brexit, and that perhaps there's another way of looking at this, or perhaps another vote to happen, especially in light of the Cambridge Analytica discovery, the fact that the accusation that it might have played a part in influencing the vote. So at the moment, we don't see a second referendum coming. Theresa May says Brexit is going ahead. So for now, that's what we're expecting. So let's see some of your other questions. Greg Sebastian saying, asking, what is the economic risk to the UK by exiting the EU? What will this cost the UK? Well, there's, again, a difference of opinion on both those questions. There have been estimates so far that, that the divorce bill per se is about, these are estimates, about £40 billion, which is quite a large sum of money that the British government will have to, or that will have to be paid to get out of, or to have this divorce. The economic cost differs on who you speak to. Some say that actually there will be a net benefit for businesses to be able to not focus, to be able to have the government negotiate trade deals beyond the EU on their behalf. And so they see this as an opening up to the rest of the world and not being constrained by the EU's rules. That's one view. Another view, and we've spoken to businesses about this, sees it differently. They say that this will limit their ability to have a good profit margin, for instance, because the EU is so close, because European countries, because of the proximity, such a natural market, such a natural place to both get suppliers and customers, that this can only be bad for business. Again, like everything connected to Brexit, it's going to be really difficult to know the answers to those questions until it actually happens, and until we see 2, 3, 5, 10 years down the road how people are affected directly. So that's my answer to that. There's somebody just commenting here. It's not a question, but I'll read it out anyway. James Troke, he says, my EU citizenship will be taken away in 1 year. It's so sad. So that's just for you to consider. Let's see. Right, so David James says, with the majority of MLAs of Northern Ireland Assembly being pro-EU, are there speculations regarding a referendum on a united Ireland as specified in the Good Friday Agreement? There's always speculation about that, and it was always left up to the parties to decide when would be the best timing. I don't suspect that this is something that's going to happen anytime in the next little while, until all these questions are being are dealt with, the Brexit questions. But it is definitely something that is enshrined in the Good Friday Agreement to be determined by the parties involved, but no dates as we speak. Michael Curry asking, what are some positives about leaving the EU? Well, the big selling point by the pro, or I should say the anti-EU side or the pro-leave side, was sovereignty and being able to determine make their own decisions here in the UK independently of the European Union. The other was also not being part of this deal that allows free movement. There had been some concern here about the growing number of European nationals who were coming here and working here. And so some here argued that it is a positive to be able to determine that as a country and not as a bloc, the European Union. So that was seen as a positive as well. Another one also is, as I mentioned earlier, the ability to negotiate trade deals separately as a country, as a member, on its own, a full member of the World Trade Organization, as opposed to being part of the European Union. So that also has been seen as a plus. So let's see what else, what other questions we have here. So Brian Earl saying, leaving the EU is the best action for Britain. Will other countries follow suit? Again, excellent question. I don't know. What I can say is that the European Union, the feeling there is that they want to make this not an easy thing to do. Not so much that they want to make an example of Britain, but they want to illustrate that being in the EU and leaving it is not something that can happen overnight. And so it appears to me, or the impression is, that the process with which Britain has had to follow, the difficulty of actually working out the divorce, is not only because of practicalities, but also to show that it is a club that is not easy to leave. And so I suspect, even if countries are considering leaving it, that they're watching the British example closely and will probably use that example to inform their own decisions. Let's see. So Andre Tihan, I guess I'm sorry again for any pronunciation problems. What is the general atmosphere on the streets of London? Is there a sense of fear about the implications of Brexit for such a cosmopolitan city, or has there been a feeling of acceptance on the referendum outcome and a willingness to move on? I love your questions, by the way. They're really, really good questions. I'd say, again, like everything, there's a division about that. It is a city that would have preferred to remain in the EU. It's a very cosmopolitan city, as you say, very diverse, and people from around the world, and certainly from all over the EU. I think there probably is some resignation mixed in with what we talked about earlier in this discussion, and that is kind of this tiny hope that maybe there's some way to reverse this, that maybe there's some second vote that could be had. So I think people are still kind of secretly hoping that maybe there's a second way, there's a second referendum. But generally people are more curious about how it's going to go. And given that Theresa May, who we think was in favor of staying in the EU, has been saying that it will be a Brexit that benefits everyone, no matter how they felt about the vote, or no matter how they voted. I think people are curious to see how it's going to work out. But as you can imagine, people would rather see, people who voted against it would rather see some way around this, some sort of middle way that preserves the things they like about being in the EU, including the free movement of people and goods, including the fact that EU citizens can come work here and vice versa in the UK. So there's a little bit of that, but I can tell you that overall there is apprehension, anxiety about the fact that so little is known about the mechanics of how it's going to go, what it's going to look like after March 29, 2019 and after that transition period. So that is common to everybody. And if there's anyone who's impatient, it is those people who voted in favor. They want this to get going and they want it now. So that's the bottom line on that. Let's see. What else? That's it for now, for your questions, I think. I think we'd probably just wrap it up here then. If you have more questions, we'll try to get to them in a written form later. And also I should tell you that if you're on the western region of Canada, in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and in British Columbia, we're still on the air for World Report with our special reports, and also from Northern Ireland. Thank you very much to those who sent questions. Keep watching us. We'll have more on Brexit in the coming months and the outcome as well. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening and watching.